Show the easy way that I was taught to make bread. 1 egg. You're gonna need 3.5 to 4 cups of flour. You're gonna need 2 teaspoons of yeast. Just make sure your yeast is probably less than 4 years old and it hasn't gone beyond its expiration date. You're gonna need 2 teaspoons of honey, which is what the yeast used to feed on. You're gonna need a whisk to mix it around, and you're going to need 1 1/3 cup water. You don't see the water in here now because the water has to be lukewarm. A good way to measure the temperature of the water is if you would put your baby in the bathtub in that water, it's perfect, right? Too hot will kill the yeast, too cold won't get it active. But just think of it as you're putting a baby into the bathtub. If you would put the baby right into that water and wouldn't have to worry, then you should be good to go. Drop 1 egg into your bowl. Don't forget to add about 2 teaspoons of honey. Right? Make sure you add the honey. You could add sugar, you could add brown sugar, you add white sugar. You just need to give your yeast something to feed on. I like using honey. Let's whisk it around a little bit and get it all mixed up right before we add the yeast and the honey. You want to make sure that not the yeast and the honey, the yeast and the water. You want to make sure that you've got the warm water in there when you add the yeast, because that's what's going to make it active. So mix this up real good. Some of you may be wondering, well, if you're using a mixer, why don't you just put the whisk attachment on? Well, I have it. I just don't feel I need to use it because it takes me less than 12 seconds to go ahead and mix that 1 egg. 1 1/3 cups of water. And remember, it's lukewarm, and I would definitely put a baby into this temperature of water. It feels good. You're going to add 2 teaspoons of yeast. 1 and 2. Now, you could use a measuring teaspoon or you could use a normal teaspoon. I know some of you are probably saying, well, the teaspoon that you're using is really not a teaspoon. You should be using a measuring spoon. You can do that too, and I do that all the time. But after my 15th, 16th, 17th time of making it, you become accustomed to exactly the amount you need. Now, most people will tell you, leave the yeast in there for about a half hour, but if your yeast is not 10 years old and it hasn't been sitting on the shelf since the last episode of Beretta came out, you are good to go. You can take this and you can pour it directly into the pot here. You can mix it in there, or you can mix it up in a jar. It doesn't matter. You could do half and half like I just did. The point I'm trying to make to you is don't try and be perfect. Right? You do not have to be perfect in this process. Pour it in there, mix it up, get it all in, and now what we're going to do is we're going to mix it up while it's in there. You're going to go ahead and give that a little swirl. Going to mix it around together, and I purposely mix it up a half in a cup together. I poured some in here just to show you again that you don't have to be perfect, right? Just mix it all. The temperature must be good. Do not make the water too hot. Do not make the water too cold. If it's too cold, you're not going to activate the yeast. If it's too hot, you're going to kill the yeast. This is a perfect temperature. Okay? And keep in mind, you have to make your egg room temperature. Let it sit for about 15 minutes. Because if you put a cold egg in there, you might want to get the water a little warmer to make sure that it's the temperature that the yeast can start feeding on that sugar and that honey. Okay? If you don't have one of these attachments or one of these mixers, then go in your back room, do some stretches, grab yourself a whisk, and you could start mixing. I'm going to add about a cup at a time. So we're going to add this first cup, we're going to put it down, and we're going to let her mix. You can see it's still a little liquidy, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to add another cup. Okay, we're going to go ahead and add another cup of flour in here. And your flour, using all-purpose flour, is perfectly fine. It doesn't have to be a specific bread flour. I use bleached. I use unbleached. It doesn't make a difference. One is more dense than the other. The unbleached is a little more dense, but your final product will come out just fine. Now that I've added more dough, you can see it's getting a little bit thicker, but obviously I got to add like another cup and a half. 2 cups of flour, but you can see it getting thicker, which is nice, and this is where you want it. And I slowed the speed down a little bit so that I can mix. What you want to see is you want to get it where it starts not sticking to the sides and it becomes one big clump. That's where you want it, so you can take it out and you can start kneading process. Okay, I went ahead and added another cup of flour. We're going to turn it on, and you're going to see how thick this baby gets. There you go. And it's just going to keep on mixing. You're going to let that mix for about another minute or two. We'll be back to check on it. Okay, so now that the mixer's going and you're getting some type of thickness there and it's starting to stick to the sides, you don't want to add another cup because it'll become too thick. Then you got to add water, and then next thing you know, your ingredients are all messed up, right? So what you want to do is just add a slight scoop at a time. And you'll see it spinning, it'll grab it out. Just give it about 15-20 seconds. You see how it's getting a little thick there? Don't worry about your machine bouncing a little bit. For those of you that have one, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And you start kneading, right? You see it's starting to stick, but not too much. So then you add another scoop there, right? Small portions at a time. You don't want to go ahead and add a cup. There you go. That's what you want. If you can see inside there, they got a nice big clump, and it's not sticking to the sides anymore. That's pretty much how you want it. Now you can start your kneading process. You can be as clean as you possibly can. You can use a pan. So what you're going to do now, some people put this directly on the cutting board. I used to do that, but it's a pain in the tuchus to keep it clean. So what I do is I get myself a pan. I sprinkle out some flour. You want to do this because if you take the dough out and you put it on a regular surface, it's going to stick. Right? So some people put oil, some people put spray pan. Everybody's got their own idea. My suggestion, use flour. Right? You can't go wrong. It won't stick to the pan. It's going to help you with the kneading process. It's going to eliminate. It's going to stop it from sticking to your fingers. If you know what I'm doing, for those of you that make bread, I don't know if you stick your hands in dough, but it's the feeling of sticking your hand in oatmeal, and that's not a good feeling. Okay. Okay, the dough's on top of the flour, and what you want to do is grab it from the bottom, and you can see, so it's not sticky, because if you grab the dough itself or you stick your fingers inside, it's going to be really sticky. So it's a really simple process. Don't try and master anything special. It's fold, knead, push, fold, push, fold, push, and that's the process you're going to follow, right? If you feel it start getting sticky, just move it over onto the dough. That's all you have to do. Fold, knead. There's nothing special about it. You don't have to make pretty shapes or any of that. It's just folding and kneading, because what you're going to do is you're going to let it sit in the pan and you're going to let it puff up. There's no special process to this. It's very simple. There is no witchcraft involved here. You're going to put some olive oil in a pan, little cooking dish, and what you're going to do is you're going to spread it all around, get it on the sides, and lubricate it nice so that your dough doesn't stick to the sides. You can use, again, in this process, you can use melted butter, you can use Spam, you can use whatever you like. I like using olive oil. Right, just put a little on coating in here, make sure the sides are all good, and then you're going to put the dough in the middle. Now, depending on how much dough you made, what you want to do is you want to get the pan about 1/3 the way up to the top, right? Because what's going to happen is you're going to leave it in the oven for about an hour with your oven off. Do not turn your oven on. And what's going to happen is it's going to puff up, and then after an hour, you're going to push it back down, let some of that air out, and then you're going to let it sit another 30 minutes. I'll walk you through that process. So what you're going to do, you're going to take your oven, you're going to put it on 350, and you're going to set your timer. If you don't have a timer, that's fine. Use your watch, use something else, and you're going to leave it for approximately 3 minutes. After 3 minutes on 350, it's going to get your oven lukewarm, and then you're going to take it out and you're going to open up. You're going to put the dough in there, and you're going to let it sit there for an hour. That warmth is going to allow the yeast to feed on the it's going to allow the yeast to feed on that honey or sugar, whatever you add it, and it is going to start to puff up. Okay, very important. You left the oven on for 3 minutes on 350. Oven off. Make sure you turn it off. Do not leave your oven on. We're going to go ahead and we're going to put this braided bread in here that we had some extra dough, so we braided it, and we're going to put this in there. We're going to leave it in for 1 hour. It's going to puff up, and we'll be back. Remember, oven off, but you're going to take your timer and you're going to set your timer for exactly 1 hour. If I can get up to 1 hour here. Not 1 hour. 1 minute, it's 1 hour. We'll be back. Here we are after an hour, and you can see we put it in there. It was 1/3 full, and you can see it just puffed up. So all you're going to do is you're just going to mash it down, right? Just tap it down. Some people take it out. They like to massage it. They like to do a whole bunch of stuff with it. You like to squeeze it, twist it. It's going to pop back into place. Don't worry about the little mushy designs that you have here. Just pat it down. Don't punch it too hard. Just mash it down a little bit. Make sure you wash your hands, of course. And once you get it down, it's going to go out about halfway. You're going to leave this for about another 30 minutes. And then you're going to go ahead and turn the oven on at 350. After 30 minutes, it's going to rise again. You're going to turn the oven on, leave it on for 350, and leave it on for exactly 1 hour. Here we are, an hour later, and the bread came very nice. We're going to pop this out, and we're going to give it a cut. Okay, I grab yourself a good bread knife. Give that baby a cut. Look at that. Nice and crunchy on the outside, and soft on the inside. That is, look at the inside. Nice and soft. See that? That is dynamite. We're gonna give that one to the birds. But this is good. It's got a nice crust on the outside and the inside super soft, and it's nice and hot. That's how you make bread.